Hello everyone.
And welcome to Dad
And Me
Love History.
Dad and me love a whole lot of history. We could be the greatest team that the world has ever seen. Dad and me love a whole lot of history.
First, a shout out to Brian Hugh from Ontario, whose mum has posted on our Facebook page.
My son has listened to each episode numerous times. He definitely loves it. I love it too.
And also on Facebook, Nicole Gantz Murray says,
My 10-year-old Declan and I love Dad and Me. We listen to it every time we get in the car.
Big shout out to Declan too. Thanks Brian and Declan and their mums.
Well, today's show is all about how Britain accidentally, on purpose, began to take over India.
We're focusing most of our time on the early days of how and why Britain got involved in India.
The British Empire began about 500 years ago when Elizabeth was queen.
Yeah, and as much as I love Elizabeth I, as you would have heard in last month's episode, I hate the fact that under her leadership in the 1560s, the British began buying people in Africa and selling them in South America and later in North America.
That's called the slave trade.
And you can find out more about that in episode 8, which was all about the American Civil War and the reasons for it. And later, Britain sent people to go and live in America. And that was the beginning of the British Empire beyond Britain and Ireland. What would the British say if the Hungarian Empire invaded? Stop it! You're making me hungry! But in the early years of Elizabeth's 45-year reign as Queen, she had the problem that Spain was the big power that controlled much of Europe, and Spain was England's enemy. Spanish King Philip II stopped European nations trading with England. You remember from the last episode that Philip wanted to marry Elizabeth so he could be King of England? So Philip, being the richest and most powerful leader in Europe and being angry that when he asked Elizabeth to marry him so he could become King of England, she replied by sending him a pile of cannonballs. Philip made sure other places like France and Italy would never buy or sell goods with England. He told them not to, and he was so powerful they did what he said. England was going to go bankrupt, run out of money, if it couldn't sell its goods like cloth and wool to other countries. And they needed to buy certain goods from other countries too, things they couldn't get in England. It's just our cats meowing. Things they couldn't get in England, like the main ingredient of gunpowder, saltpeter. So Protestant Elizabeth reached out to countries like Turkey and Morocco, who were strictly Islamic or Muslim, and they didn't much like Catholic Spain, which was really throwing its weight around and trying to tell everyone else what to do around North Africa and West Asia, as well as Europe. Anyway, Elizabeth asked those countries like Turkey and Morocco to trade with England. Do you mind going to see if there's any way we can shut that cat up? Thanks, James. He was just dealing with Messi there, one of our cats. So, sometimes that happens at Dad and Me Studios. Turkey was much more powerful than England during the early decades, especially of Elizabeth's reign, so she couldn't boss them around. To charm the Muslim leaders, she wrote nice things about them in her letters to them, and she sent them gifts. She began her letters to the Turkish Sultan like this, and this is word for word. These next 6 words is exactly how she began her letters. Most Imperial and most Invincible Emperor. That's how she would begin. So she was really sucking up to them, right? She showed great respect. And she would go on to write things, well, something like this. It is a great pleasure to have a friend like you. You're so much nicer than those Catholic leaders who think so much of themselves and all their gold statues. They even pray to such idols. You Muslims and us Church of England Protestants would never do such a thing. We pray to God, not statues. Those Catholics are so last century. Anyway, would a huge silver organ with a clock built into it, would that make you happy? Jolly good, because there's only one in the world. I've had it made and it's outside your door right now. You're welcome. Yep, she really did have a giant silver organ, an organ like a massive piano, taller than the room of a house, like you imagine your bedroom or your living room, taller than that, and it had this huge silver clock built into it, kind of on top of the keyboard that you'd play. She went on. Now, your greatness, how about we agree a great big trade deal where we sell you things we've got that you want and you sell us some nice spices to spice up our boring food and some lovely silk to make our clothes look almost as beautiful as yours. And could you, most amazing and invincible Imperial Emperor, please throw in a boatload or 10 of saltpeter for making gunpowder? And I know you said in your previous letter that you've got a tinsy-wincy bit board of cloth and wool that we have sent you. So how about a few boatloads of lead from our metal mines? You once told me, your most brilliant super-duper majesty, that lead makes the best bullets for your guns. You could shoot a good few of those blasted Spaniards. I look forward to your reply, my dearest, most invincible emperor. Signed, Elizabeth. When Sultan Murad received the first letter from Elizabeth, he was kind of surprised to even hear from a female ruler of a small country on the edge of Europe that he'd barely heard of.
But he liked the respect, the charm, and the huge silver organ.
Yeah, so those trade deals worked well for England. Back then, if you were from England, you could travel far more safely through Muslim countries in North Africa and West Asia than you could in Catholic countries in Europe. That kind of gave the Elizabethans the idea to travel further into Asia.
What country did Indians invent?
I don't know. What country did Indians invent?
Korea. Korea.
Korea. Elizabeth died having had no children. It would have been her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, who would have been the next Queen of England when Elizabeth died, but there was one problem.
What was the problem?
When Elizabeth died, Mary, Queen of Scots no longer had her head attached to her body.
Because Elizabeth chopped it off.
Yep, true story. Mary, Queen of Scots had claimed to be Queen of England as well as Scotland. Elizabeth didn't like that. You could say Mary, Queen of Scots, she got ahead of herself. Ahead of herself. Anyway, Mary had a son. What can you tell us about him? Do you remember what he was called?
James?
Yep, King James. And before he was King of England, do you know where he was King of?
Scotland.
That's right, he was already King of Scotland. England and Scotland were two completely separate kingdoms. They joined together when Elizabeth died in 1603, and James, King of Scotland, he was James the sixth person called James to be King of Scotland. He also became James the First of England. But it wasn't until 1707, a century later, that the two kingdoms, England and Scotland, officially joined together, and we officially get the country of Britain, or Great Britain. From then onwards, we talk about Britain and the British Empire rather than the English Empire. So really the British Empire did start as the English Empire under Elizabeth. By the way, whoever was King of England was also King of Wales. They had sorted that out a few centuries earlier than Elizabeth.
So if you only get one thing from all that blah 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 blah, remember that Britain does not equal England. Britain equals England, Wales and Scotland all together.
Why don't you ever see penguins in Great Britain?
I don't know.
Because they're scared of whales.
And now we go to an advert break for parents.
In his final days, Alexander the Great's generals asked him, Who should succeed him? Alexander's answer, the strongest. Taken literally, this would see the close of the classical Greek age, an age thousands of years in the making. Join me, Mark Selleck, as I go back to retell the story of ancient Greece in my series Casting Through Ancient Greece. We will cast our way back to its beginnings, all the way through to the spread of its culture throughout the known world, thanks to Alexander and his generals. You can listen and subscribe to the series at www.castingthroughancientgreece.com, or you can listen on your favourite podcasting platform. Don't forget to follow the series over on Twitter at Casting Greece or on Facebook at Casting Through Ancient Greece. I look forward to seeing you there.
We love history. We love history, baby. We love history.
So back to India.
Elizabeth had several special trading companies, businesses set up. Each one was in charge of trading with one particular country, or in North Africa or Asia. One of these trading companies traded with Persia, which is Iran today, one with Morocco, and another one called the Turkey Company traded with the Ottoman Empire, as Turkey and its empire was known back then. But then Elizabeth agreed that one more company could be set up, one business which would change the history of the world, and it was called the East India Company.
The East Indian Company would bring tea and spices from India to England, and the people in India did not get a fair deal from the English.
Yeah, that's right. So this company was in charge of all of Britain's trading with India. The English were competing for influence in India with other nations who began a similar sort of thing, wanting to trade there and building some of their own buildings, warehouses and so on that they could use to help their trade. Powers like Spain, France and Portugal were all racing to increase their own power and their own empires. India was not one unified country back then. It was lots of smaller kingdoms ruled by different rulers. In one kingdom, the Mughal emperor allowed the British to build a factory at Surat in 1613. This is when James was king of England. In 1615, the British were allowed to trade and build factories all across the Mughal Empire. Then, other kingdoms allowed the British to build factories in places like Madras, and even to build whole cities like Calcutta. The East India Company aimed not only to trade with India, but also to trade with other places in the south and southeast of Asia. From the base the British built up in India, over the following centuries, they would conquer many other places. Can you name other countries today that Britain took over in that Asia-Pacific region?
Hong Kong.
Yeah, good. Hong Kong, where we used to live, was one of them. Malaysia as well, and Singapore, which is kind of on the way to Hong Kong from India. And then,
Australia?
Yeah, from there they went down to Australia. So we were just talking about what was happening in the 17th century, and in the next century, the 18th century, the British got to where we are now, where we live now, which is Australia, and all using their sort of base of India as a launching point. But anyway, back to India. As the East India Company increasingly interfered in Indian politics, like governments, how they run their different kingdoms in those little kingdoms around India, but they faced more and more opposition as they interfered more. Over 100 years after King James, when King George II was king in the 1750s, the Nawab of Bengal, meaning the leader of the Bengal area or kingdom, attacked the British at Calcutta. That Calcutta was that city the British had built up to be like a trading port to help British trade. And understandably, many of the local Indian people were fed up. The deals were always so unfair. The British had more guns, so they kind of set the prices as they wanted to. But in 1757, the Nawab of Bengal was defeated in a big battle by the British East India Company. That was the Battle of Plassey.
That's right, the East Indian Company had its own army by now.
Yeah, they said they needed the extra security to stop people stealing things from their factories and warehouses and ports.
That's how taking over India was kind of accidentally on purpose.
Exactly. And that victory at that Battle of Plassey enabled the East India Company to spread its power over the next 100 years all over India. As the company's power grew, so did the unfairness and cruelty of British rule. So much so that in 1857, this is by now Victoria is Queen of Britain and the British Empire grows to its biggest during her reign. In 1857, there was a big rebellion in India against British rule. Only now did the British East India Company lose a lot of its power. And that was only because now the British government decided to take over India officially. They said, no, enough of letting businesses try and control India. They're not doing it properly. So we're going to send in more soldiers, shoot more people, and be stricter and take India completely for Britain. They said they needed to do it in order to protect the British people and property and factories that were already in India. So from 1858, it wasn't the East India Company controlling bits of India, it was Britain's government forces controlling all of it. And they didn't stop there. They took over neighbouring countries like Myanmar and Afghanistan, and then so on to Malaysia, Hong Kong, etc. So, James, do you think overall that Britain took over India more accidentally or more on purpose?
On purpose? Because Britain didn't actually take it over until Queen Victoria was in. It's only a business taking it over, and then they took it on purpose because they wanted all the stuff, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, definitely by 1858, when after that Indian rebellion, and Britain sent in its army. Yeah, you can't say that was accidental. I guess you could say before that, well, we were just trading and we were just building some factories there, and you could maybe say at the early days was, we're not invading, honest we're not, but it certainly ended up that way for sure.
What did the Indian boy say to his mother as he left school?
I don't know. What did the Indian boy say to his mother as he left school?
Mumbai.
Can you get it?
Mumbai. That's what the city of Bombay is called today. It used to be called Bombay, now it's called Mumbai.
Here are 6 questions to test if you were listening.
1. In which continent outside Europe did Britain's empire begin?
Number 2. What was the slave trade?
3. Why did Elizabeth say that Catholics are so last century, not her exact words?
Number 4. What was the difference between England and Britain?
Number 5. What was the name of the only business that Elizabeth allowed to trade with India?
Number 6. And our final question. How did Britain go from only having a trading company in India to invading India?
Which country's empire tastes best at Christmas?
Hungary?
Turkey!
Well, that's about it from Dad and me.
Hey people, have you told your friends about this podcast series yet? Share!
Yeah, don't be selfish.
And over on Instagram, a long-time fan called Bubba was one of many across social media to wish us a happy birthday. Thanks, Bubba.
Bye from now.
From Dad,
And me.
Love History.
Dad and me love a whole lot of history. We could be the greatest team that the world has ever seen. Dad and me love a whole lot of history.
Okay, so I can do this.
Hi. Hi. Hi.
Or any other words like,
Sure.
because I don't know how to say it.
As long as it comes out really
Hello.
funny.
I'll do this.
Hello.
Okay?
Yep.
Because I don't know how to say the word.
Okay. Ready when you are.
What did the Indian boy say to his mother as he left school?
I don't know. What did the Indian boy say to his mother as he left school?
Mumbai.
What country did Indians invent?
I don't know. What country did Indians invent?
Korea.
Korea.
No, Korea. That's how I say it.
Korea, yeah.
No, Korea.
Korea. They're just so embarrassing.
Ad break.
And you can find out more about that. I'm going to find out which episode. And you can find out more about that in episode 8. Do you mind going to see if there's any way we can shut that cut up?
Okay, yeah, gotta. Break.
You know, sometimes that happens at Dad and Me Studios. Where were we?
Trading with Turkey.
Yep.
Ooh, that's high pitch.
Which country's empire tastes best at Christmas?
Hungry?
Turkey! Alright, in the outtakes, I'm going to admit to the listeners that due to technical problems, we had to record that 3 times.
Because you forgot to plug it in at one end.
Yeah, okay, I might have forgotten to plug the microphone in. Yes, and hence your laughter was much louder than it normally would be, because this time you were acting. So normally, my jokes don't make you laugh so much.
See, I should become an actor. Boom.
Boom.
Bye from now.
From Dad
And me.
Love history.
I'm out.